Well, let's in the meantime talk about the big meeting that happened in Alaska. Now, as said by President Trump that he will be connecting with the leaders of the NATO and also with President Zelensky. This is a development coming in where Donald Trump seems to have held a phone conversation with the Ukrainian president and with the EU leaders after the Alaska summit. He seems to have updated or briefed the leaders of what went about as far as the meeting that happened with President Putin. But it seems that now the ball has been left in the court of the Ukrainian President Zelensky, as it seems that Donald Trump is of the opinion that there has been certain progress. However, there is still no end to the war or the conflict ongoing between Ukraine and Russia. Let's get in a word from Rishabh, who is connected with us. Rishabh, it seems that what happened in the summit has been briefed by Donald Trump to the other leaders of the EU and also with President Zelensky.
Well, Amita, definitely. What we are learning right now that President Trump has dialed a number of leaders right now, just after the meeting with President Putin in Alaska. And what we are given to understand that all the leaders in Europe, as well as Zelensky, for that matter, has been very very clearly briefed about what transpired in the closed-door meeting between Trump and Putin. The body language of both the leaders at the press conference was very clear. And now what we're told that, from here on, things will be decided by Russia and Ukraine. Trump says he has done his bit, and he believes that things will be better from here on.
All right. But with developments that are now coming in, of course, Rishabh, it seems that President Trump is of the opinion that President Zelensky is now up to him to decide what happens next. Is the ball now in his court?
See, what needs to be decided? What needs to be decided are terms and conditions of the ceasefire. That will include whether there will be land swap or not, whether Russia will leave what it has annexed since February 2022, or will Ukraine will let go of the lost land, which is around about 22% of Ukrainian territory. Most of it is basically the Russian-speaking territories of Ukraine. So that all needs to be looked into. These nitty-gritties need to be seen. But having said that, now the major thing will also be dependent on what Europe tells Zelensky to do. If Europe says that there is no other option and go ahead with.
But we talk about another possible meeting. Now, this time what is now being said that after a Trump-Putin meeting, Zelensky is now expected to call on President Trump next week. That means on Monday, as far as now what is being said according to news reports. Meenakshi, if you can get us the details. After Trump-Putin, is Trump going to meet Zelensky?
Well, yes, Amita. So that's the big breaking news coming in, and the confirmation basically seems to be coming from none other than Volodymyr Zelensky himself. He's put out a long post here. First part of the post is about how he had a long conversation with Porter, something which you and Rishabh were just having a detailed conversation on. Zelensky says, and I quote, "We had a long and substantiated conversation with Porter. We started with a one-on-one talk before inviting European leaders to join us. This call lasted for more than 1.5 hours, including about an hour of a bilateral conversation with President Trump." And then he goes on to say that they are committed, Ukraine is committed eventually towards reaching for peace. That is their ultimate goal. Finally, this is also very significant, which you were just mentioning, and that's the breaking news point we would like to highlight for our viewers, Amita. Zelensky saying, and I quote him verbatim, "I will be meeting President Trump in Washington, D.C. to discuss all the details regarding ending the killing and the war. I am grateful for the invitation." It's also important that Europeans are involved at every stage to ensure reliable security guarantees together with America. So he is obviously asking Europe also to be engaged in the discussion which happens with America. But obviously the mood point and the breaking news point here is a confirmation coming from Volodymyr Zelensky that indeed that crucial meeting after the Alaska summit, after the meeting between Putin and Modi, Putin and Trump, the next meeting is going to happen between Zelensky and Trump. It's going to happen in Washington, D.C. That meeting scheduled for upcoming Monday.
All right. We'll be standing by for the details there. Meenakshi, thank you very much. Where after Trump's talks with Putin in Alaska, however, yielded no significant breakthrough for Ukraine, the U.S. president said that he would rather advise Zelensky to agree to a peace deal. But this was a highly anticipated summit that happened in Alaska between the presidents of Russia and the United States of America that ended without yielding any result of ending the war or a ceasefire or a pause. But while both leaders described the talks to be productive, there was no breakthrough or commitment on the central issue of the conflict. Donald Trump claims that great progress has been made, stating that many points were agreed upon, though few remain unresolved. He, however, claims that there is still no deal until there is actually a deal.
I believe we had a very productive meeting. There were many points that we agreed on, most of them, I would say, a couple of big ones that we haven't quite gotten there, but we've made some headway. So there's no deal until there's a deal. I will call up NATO in a little while. I will call up the various people that I think are appropriate, and I'll, of course, call up President Zelensky and tell him about today's meeting. It's ultimately up to them. They're going to have to agree with what Marco and Steve and some of the great people from the Trump administration who've come here, Scott and John Ratcliffe. Thank you very much. But we have some of our really great leaders. They've been doing a phenomenal job. We also have some tremendous Russian business representatives here. And I think, you know, everybody wants to deal with us. We've become the hottest country anywhere in the world in a very short period of time. And we look forward to that. We look forward to dealing. We're going to try and get this over with.
Now, as far as the Russian president is concerned, he has also praised his recent talks with President Trump, describing them as constructive, saying that the two leaders have reached an understanding. Putin has also reaffirmed Donald Trump's long-standing claim that the war in Ukraine would not have happened if Trump was in office.
I'd like to remind you that in 2022, during the last contact with the previous administration, I tried to convince my previous American colleague that the situation should not be brought to the point of no return when it would come to hostilities. And I said it quite directly back then that it's a big mistake. Today, when President Trump saying that if he was the president back then, there will be no war. And I'm quite sure that it would indeed be so. I can confirm that. I think that overall, me and President Trump have built a very good, businesslike and trustworthy contact. And I have every reason to believe that moving down this path, we can come, and the sooner the better, to the end of the conflict in Ukraine.
Well, Rishabh, lots been happening there in the backdrop as far as this meeting now is concerned. Another round of meeting that is expected to happen with the other side, which is Zelensky, who is expected to meet Donald Trump in Washington.
Well, definitely, Zelensky is expected to meet Donald Trump in Washington on Monday is what we are given to understand, and if that happens, that will be another significant meeting. Now, we need to understand something, that there is an understanding that both Trump and Putin has been discussing and have been publicly talking about. Now, whether Zelensky agrees to that understanding or not, that is something that will further tell us how things would go from here on. Also, when we talk about whether Zelensky will agree to everything that Russia and US has agreed to, that is something that needs to be seen. You know, if there are things like Mariupol, Donbass, Lugansk, and all these areas, then there is a problem, because Ukraine will not let go of their territories. Mariupol happens to be the only second port that Ukraine has. If Mariupol goes, it will be left with only one port. And, it would be close to a landlocked country, which Ukraine will not like to be. So that all needs to be discussed, and whether Russia and Ukraine both are on the same page when it comes to land and what happens to the annexed land after ceasefire is something that will decide the future course of action.
All right. But as far as how much importance or how much dependency, Rishabh, that Ukraine has of the United States, because here Zelensky seems to be saying that there is needed to be an immediate intervention on part of United States, yes, but also when it comes to the European leaders.
See, whether Ukraine has leverage here or not, that is something that depends on what European leaders are ready to shell out. If European leaders say that if the conflict goes on, we will take care of the conflict, then Ukraine definitely has a leverage. US is in no mood to continue backing Ukraine for the war, and that's for sure. So it is very clear what Macron thinks, what Germany thinks, what UK thinks. So all these leaders will also be an instrumental part in shaping up the future of Russia-Ukraine crisis. So that all depends. If that happens, then Ukraine definitely have leeway points, and they can go ahead and do that.
Okay.
If they fail to, back Ukraine.
Well, any interference on part of EU and NATO is something that the Russian president doesn't want, but will there be a deal? However, there is no deal till there is one. This seems to be the statement that came in from President Trump. Now Zelensky is seeking US intervention and also of the EU leaders to be involved at all costs. And this meeting now between the two other leaders, that is President Trump and President Zelensky, would be taking place come Monday. Thank you very much for the moment, Rishabh, for joining in. Let's quickly